Well, hello again, and welcome back to the 6.5 Summit. I'm Shelley Kramer, founding partner and lead analyst here at Futurum. And on behalf of my team at Futurum Research and the entire team at Moor Insights and Strategy, welcome. We're glad to have you. In this next spotlight session, Futurum's Daniel Newman is joined by Clay McGurk, the Executive Vice President of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, to discuss why businesses' need for flexibility will drive hybrid and multi-cloud deployment in our post-pandemic world. 2020 was a huge year for cloud infrastructure, and it's easy to see why this decade will continue that trend. Let's jump in and see what Clay has to say.
Clay McGurk, welcome back to the 2021 edition of the 6.5 Summit. We're so excited to have you once again as part of our event.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, it's a big day one, and we are really glad to have so many influential voices coming from, such a wide swath of the technology industry. Like I said, you were with us last year. The event went from a day and a half to 5 days, and so we are really hoping that everybody out there is going to get a ton of value. I have a really good feeling that our conversation is going to cover a lot of ground. People that are interested in just kind of the state of cloud and where this whole thing is heading. I'm going to hit you up across everything. We're going to talk about everything from silicon to hybrid architectures to kind of the whole approach that Oracle is taking. So, but before I do that, I should probably just say, how you been? How you doing? How's your last year gone?
Well, I spend a lot of time in front of a video camera talking to people on the internet. It used to be that when I was growing up in the 90s, that was not cool. But now apparently that is the state of the art. It's the best in high technology these days. So look, I'm doing well. I think as well as everybody can. I'm super excited by where we're at in the world. That I think things are getting better. They're on the upswing. Not everywhere exactly, but the general trend. So I'm super excited for where the next year is going to take us.
Yeah, who'd have thunk that being the AV guy or gal would become cool? I mean, but all these collaboration apps and tools that are super neat across tech right now, I mean, that's just modern AV. So essentially, if you love collab, you love AV. And what's old is new and all that whole thing. But I guess being AV is cool. And you know what? Being tech is cool, right? Roblox, kids that code, all that stuff. Don't have your kids play football. Have them write code. I'm not sure if I mean that, but I mean, in serious, it's definitely something to consider.
Well, I don't have any children, so and I don't think I can claim to be cool. And if I think the more I tried to claim it, it would be less and less true. But technology is taking over the world, right? In general, right? We'll talk some more about cloud and other things today, but it's interesting how, in many ways, I feel like if you go back 20 years ago, the world looks very similar. It's not like there were no cars and there's cars and there was no, but a lot of what people do every day and how they do it has fundamentally changed. And you can't say that tech is not cool because everyone's doing it.
Oh, it's super cool. I will say this though. I turned 40 last week. I'm willing to admit that some people wouldn't. And I've lived two lives though. I've lived a life with technology, everyday part of it, and I lived a life without. I went to school where we had Apple IIe computers and we were learning keyboarding, and it was a special 30 minutes once a week that you got to go into the lab at school and type. And yeah. I would think it would be kind of fun though in art. I know they've done some of these like in some of those clickbait articles, like taking your phone out of everyday existence. But I mean, imagine now walking through an airport if for one day like people weren't carrying their technology. It's so different now. Anyways, I digress.
I completely agree. I find it as hard as suddenly you have to like show up on time and you have to make plans ahead of time, because otherwise you can't just talk to anyone anytime, right? You're just, I guess I'll just wait. It's very weird.
Imagine taking a trip. You had to have your airline tickets. You had to know where your cab was going to be coming from. You actually had to book a hotel in advance. You couldn't get to the airport and be like, oh crud, and go onto an app. It's a whole nother world. And the cloud has enabled a lot of this. By the way, I didn't plan any of this as a lead in, but last year we talked about, kind of, the shifts in cloud infrastructure. And of course, we thought we were in the middle of a pandemic that was likely probably going to end sometime not that far after. Well, a year later, almost a year since the first 6.5 summit, and we're still not done. We're done-er, we're closer. We're getting to a point. Some things are getting normal. The vaccine, it's opening up, but a lot has changed. So I want to talk about that. Last year we noted that there was a lot of momentum in cloud. And what I can tell you, at least my assessment, is this hasn't slowed at all whatsoever. But I'd love to know from a year ago to now, some of the key kind of cloud trends that you've seen either accelerate faster or pop up since we talked last time.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There's the general stuff, which is cloud adoption has accelerated. I think with the COVID pandemic stuff, what people have realized is it's really nice to be able to have these services that everyone can work remotely, that cloud providers can take on more responsibility, and then you don't have to deal with the consequences of that. I think these collaboration platforms are a great example. So that's kind of general stuff. When it comes to cloud infrastructure, I really, from my perspective, I've noticed three things. The first one I would say is that the industry, which this has been happening over the past few years, has really full on kind of embraced hybrid and multi-cloud. So, if 3 years ago, if I were talking to customers, a lot of them were like, hey, I'm going to move everything to this one public cloud vendor. That's not the discussions I have with most customers these days. They've got some stuff on-prem. It's going to stay there for a long time. They've got some stuff they're going to move to this public cloud. They need to interoperate with this other public cloud. They have some SaaS over here. So the reality, as we actually, the plan meets reality, it is a little bit more complicated. The second thing I think is that machine learning and AI continues to pervade more and more of the work that everyone does. And so that can be from very specific advancements with things like Alexa in your house or Siri on your phone, but it's changing kind of the background, the way a lot of people do business. So at Oracle, we've been doing very interesting projects with companies like Red Bull and the English Premier League on analytics, and we actually did some really cool stuff with a soccer team here in the U.S. Optimizing their players and using AI machine learning to kind of call strategy for different pieces. So that's been a huge advancement. And then I would say that the third thing that has kind of happened, and this gets more into the deep guts of infrastructure, but that's my background, and so I think it's very exciting, is ARM and kind of this instruction set has really, I'd say, taken over the world when it comes to mobile and IoT over the past decade or so. But if you look at now what's happened in the past year, there's a huge advancement in ARM on laptops and desktops with what Apple's been doing, like with the M1. And then if you see what is happening in the cloud infrastructure space, Ampere, who's our partner, has done an amazing job with their Ampere Ultra processor, and we launched that recently, but also what Amazon is doing with Graviton and then Graviton 2. So there's a huge kind of push to this new microarchitecture that's taking, I think, the world by storm in cloud infrastructure.
Yeah, those are three big identifiers. I would agree with all of them. First of all, love soccer and English Premier League, so I want in on all that. Want to find out where that's going on and maybe make some investments. But in all seriousness, I love that. I love tracking the Red Bull Racing piece too. I actually covered that, put some analysis on that, and those are the practical applications though that really help people grasp what's going on. And so these are things when you start putting AI to work on things that people love and have passion for, it's when technology starts to make sense, which I love about that.
Completely. So being able to work with companies who have very clear use cases like that, and then of course including the machine learning training, and then taking in the huge data sets, and then continuing to evolve those is super critical. And then of course I'm a racing fan in general, so there's that aspect of it, which is also just cool to be doing something that you feel so viscerally.
Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that offline because I'm fanatical about going fast. You could call me Ricky Bobby. No, you can't call me that, but I do like to go fast. And your other two, the assessments, I mean, you mentioned this. I completely agree. Hybrid multi-cloud. I mean, just recently, even I believe it was Satya Nadella during Build came out and really pushed that multi-architecture, talked about making it. And my point is, you're starting to see the trend. You mentioned Graviton around the ARM thing, but I'm saying like all these different vendors are kind of coming out and just being really candid. Like, we believe workloads are going to be in many places for different reasons. And it's been really encouraging because I've identified that trend for a few years. I've been talking about it, but it's been only recently that I think we're starting to hear it with a little bit of zest from the executives across the cloud space.
Well, look, I think that it's any. I think the reason that all the cloud providers are saying it is because the customers are demanding it, right? Obviously, as a cloud provider, we'd all prefer to take 100% of your workloads, and our job is to be able to say yes to all of that and do them very well. But I've never heard any vendor who goes, well, you should actually, we're not very good there. Go with this competing technology. That's probably best for you. That's not how they succeed long term. But the reality is, in the same way that in this on-premise world that we're coming from, nobody got everything from one provider, right? You didn't get all of your storage and your networking and your operating system and your computers and your business. You didn't. No, you actually need to have multiple for a variety of reasons. They're not all the same level of quality, sophistication, reliability. And also, you don't always want to put all your eggs in a single basket. And so what I think you're seeing is that in the early days of cloud infrastructure adoption, it was easy for people to bet on one because it wasn't the huge diversity of companies, and it also wasn't the huge diversity of workloads. It's very different when you're just moving 10 or 15% of your workloads. Hey, we'll move the digital marketing stuff over there. We'll do this new website. That's fine. But when you're suddenly going, I'm going to move everything, right? I'm going to move all of my core backend applications, all of my front end applications, everything that runs my entire business. Am I going to really put all of that on a single provider? I think what people are realizing, what cloud providers accept, what customers have shown us, is that no, actually, it's going to be multi-cloud. And even if in the long term it's going to be public cloud everywhere, the transition is going to be many, many years where we're going to have a hybrid scenario. And what they demand is they want cloud providers to actually deliver technological solutions that make it easy to run across clouds and then also to run between the public cloud and their existing data centers.
Absolutely. And you hit that on the head. I'm not by any means claiming it's all altruism. I mean, the capitalism is a motivator, and also customer experience is a motivator. In fact, I talked to your peer, Rob Tarkoff, about that, and we'll have his session tomorrow about CX. But I'm saying, like, it's becoming acknowledged. At one time, it wasn't even acknowledged. Like, people were like, almost trying to like force the fit. And now it's starting to say, look, we know you're smart. You're figuring it out. You're doing your research. You're paying attention, whether it's sovereignty and compliance or regulatory or redundancy or just services, certain services that one has in another. You're going to probably want to have as much flexibility from cloud to cloud as you do from prem to cloud. And so it's happening. And now the companies are, to their credit, saying we care about the customer, so we're going to build the services to make it compatible. And by the way, we've got Simon Segers from ARM here, and he'll be talking on Thursday along with Jensen Huang from NVIDIA to talk about what you mentioned, which, by the way, couldn't agree more. The ARM contribution in the data center for building these ASICs and this multiprocessor story. I think it's just in its infancy. And by the way, it's important to note, everybody wants it to be an or thing. Everybody wants it to be like, well, good ARM, bad Intel, and you're partners with both. And the bottom line is that when a market is growing, this could be cloud, this could be this can be the CPUs required for cloud. You can actually add competition, add innovation, and all the companies can keep growing. And so that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't want to acknowledge or want to make it competitive. But I think both companies could win, and in the end, the customer wins.
I completely agree. Right. This is all about, I think, having the right amount of competition. And when you look at the microarchitecture space, right, I think it's been great to see the resurgence of AMD over the past few years, and I think that's providing value to customers. And then having ARM and companies like Ampere, like what Amazon's doing with Graviton, what it really provides is it provides more customer choice, and it keeps these companies innovating, right? What I think is, going back to the thing we've started at the very, very beginning of this conversation, the reason that technology is so much better today than it was 2 decades ago is because there's been a relentless push and competition to make it better. And so I think that absolutely ARM coming in, it's at the point now where ARM and what we're doing with Ampere, it's not just, oh, it's not a consolation prize. Well, you could run that. No, actually, it'll run better. And you should. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's better for many workloads. Well, that causes companies like Intel to go and push and up their game. It causes, so that competition comes, right? And then what I think, as you talked about, like NVIDIA, what they're doing with, the GPU side and the AI accelerators, there's a huge explosion. And in this industry, we see these ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's all software. And then what I think is really cool now is there's a lot more investment as an industry into the hardware. It's kind of going back to the old days of Silicon Valley, right? There's more and more investment into the cool advancements that we can make across hardware chips, hardware accelerators. And it's a really exciting time to be in technology. I think it's an exciting time to be a person who gets to take advantage of these advancements.
Yeah, in January 2020, I wrote a trend piece in MarketWatch, and I said semiconductors will eat the world. Everybody said software will eat the world. Actually, I went one layer down. I said because the chip layer is what it makes everything else possible. So the fact that you guys in the cloud industry as a whole is looking at architectures and the chips is a big indicator of where you all see it going. So I want to take you there now. Let's talk about where we see it going. We mentioned, competition drives positioning. As was it Lending Tree said, when banks compete, you win. Well, when vendors compete, the enterprises win. I feel your story, the Oracle story, by the way, in Gen 2 is much refined, much better than Gen 1. Clearly, that's been indicated through some of the successes, and I'd love for you to share some of that. But I've really found the story to be a little bit more oriented towards simplicity. We know there's a sprawl of offerings, but I just, as I look at what you're doing, I keep saying, Oracle isn't necessarily trying to have 1,000 different variations of every offering, like I feel some of the cloud providers have, and that might be working for them. But simplicity, it seems to be working for you. Talk about that. Is it working, and why do you see it working?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's one of the things that we've really tried to do as we design and architect OCI is to be incredibly thoughtful about what services we create. How do we have as few services as possible, but no fewer? And how do we kind of factor things such that you solve all of a customer's problems, but without increasing the complexity? Because the reality is, and I think you can see this across all the layers, especially it affects things like security. The difficulty a lot of times in doing things these days, especially in the cloud, is not that, oh, I can't do it, or I can't, oh, it's impossible. There's so many options. It's not there's one way. Well, there's 5 ways. There's this type of queuing, and there's that type of streaming, and there's this way and that option. Well, what do I do as a customer? And yes, you want choice because there is no one size fits all. But at the same time, it's very easy for customers to become overloaded by the huge variety. And so what we've tried to do is just take a step back and go, well, instead of having to build 3 new services, all that solve 1/3 of that problem, how can we actually build an integrated solution that really solves that problem end to end, and then give that to customers and make it simpler for them to actually adopt it? Same thing, if you were to look, for example, at what we're doing with, we transitioned from our old fixed load balancer to our flexible load balancers. It would have been very easy to say, oh, now we have a new service, and then we have the old customers on the old thing and they need to migrate. No, we just make it as a new option. And there's a one button click upgrade that seamlessly transitions you from one to the other. So it's not just even sometimes you don't always get it right the first time. How do you make it super easy for customers to make that transition? It's been critically important for us. And that's where we're seeing the success, because with a lot of the customers that we're going after, we're trying to enable them to move their most demanding workloads to the cloud. They already have enough complexity. They've got 15 different versions of this application, old operating system, this huge sprawl. They need us as a cloud provider to simplify that, make it super easy to move over. If you look at a lot of our customer success over the past year with customers like FedEx and 7-Eleven, who've been able to take advantage of that simplicity and move it to our cloud. Or if you look at customers, for example, like ISVs, like Tanium and Xactly and others and Cybereason are choosing our platform because of simplified security, very easy to understand billing model, predictable price, amazing performance. All the way up through a lot of our video streaming customers like Zoom and 8x8 who choose our platform because they need the security, they need the reliability, and they need the really efficient, cloud infrastructure economics, high scale, high bandwidth applications. They're all coming to us for exactly those reasons. It's not that I've suddenly built 50 new services that no one else has. It's about how do we solve those problems for the customer in a simpler, easier way.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the question a lot are going to ask. I mean, of course, there's your more sophisticated. It's just like, low code versus pro code, right? There are going to be instances where the app builder wants to have control over every instance. The DPU, they're going to want to be able to commission resources exactly to each part of the stack. And then there's parts where it's like, look, I just need A, B, and C. I don't want to think a lot about it. I want to do business. I want to grow. I want to scale. I think Zoom was super representative of this. And I don't know the full outlook as you probably do as to Zoom's commitment or Zoom uses, what other clouds and how much distribution of its business. I'm sure it's probably a true multi-cloud player, but I thought that was a great example of a win. I mean, you're talking about a company that's just pouring on growth, added 300-400% revenue gains on a quarterly basis, was an absolute winner of the unfortunate pandemic, but at the same time was keeping the world connected. But behind it were cloud providers. Behind it was endless scale being offered, knobs being turned that essentially said, you can 10x your customers in a week, in a month, and we'll keep you running.
Yeah, so I completely, and Zoom's been, I think, a huge, important piece of technology over the past year, right? And they absolutely are multi-cloud, and we're very happy that they're a customer of ours, and they run a big chunk of their business on us. But that comes back to our multi-cloud discussion, right? Customers like Zoom, they're not all in on one cloud. They have their own data centers. They use multiple cloud providers, and they're constantly optimizing what they put where and how do they optimize their business, whether it's they want global reach over here or they need certain features that are only available in one spot. That's exactly what you do. And I think that the reason that these customers end up coming to OCI is there was a lack of awareness at the time, but Zoom was in a position where they needed capacity. They showed up and we had it for them and we were able to onboard them super, super quickly. And kind of just finishing off that complexity, simplicity conversation, the low code, no code. The way I like to think about it is there's inherent complexity and there's accidental complexity. You want to have the options for people at whatever level of abstraction they need, right? If it's low code, if it's pro code, all of that. But there are things that are essential to the task. And to me, that's the inherent complexity. And you can't really get rid of that. And the only way to get rid of that is to really make choices for the customer that you're not really qualified or aware to do. But there's a lot that we've done in cloud infrastructure that it takes our accidental complexity and we transfer it over to the customer. We make them solve problems that we as a provider should be solving. And at Oracle and at OCI, we have a relentless focus on driving down that accidental complexity. So that you as a customer get the full benefits of our services without having to go and optimize and create very complex machinery on the outside. That's really, I think, the way to kind of think about the simplicity aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a few minutes left, Clay, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for the time. Super happy to have you. Let's talk about the future. With so many great minds here in one place. I'm trying to ask this question, in some form or variety to all of you. I want to know, in your case, in the cloud, what's next? What's the next big evolution? What do you focus on? What are you building? What's happening behind the scenes that, you can share? I know you can't share everything, but, what's going to drive the business forward? What's going to drive your next wave of growth? What are customers asking for?
Yeah. Well, I think the big investments that we're making are really continuing down the same path. So it's not a new strategy, but it's kind of a continued investment and evolution. What I hear from customers is that it's still too hard. If you actually, right, the reality is we talk about the cloud. The vast majority of stuff's not in the cloud. And it's not because customers haven't heard about it. It's because it's too hard to move, right? And so how do you make it easier for them? So we're making massive investments and making it super easy for people to migrate. Well, when you get there, it's too hard to do disaster recovery. It's too hard to do HA. How do you make those things massively simpler to do? And not in this kind of simple way where it's like, well, you just rewrite your entire application using my new PaaS layer, and then you'll have easy HA. That's great. That'll help us 20 years from now. But how do I actually solve the problem for the 95% of our IT spend that actually generates, 99% of our revenue? That's the things that we're really focused on. If you look at, the huge investments that we're making with things like HeatWave on the MySQL side, how do we do deep engineering projects to bring massive, enhancements to existing workloads? That's what we're really trying to do. Instead of saying, hey, you customer, rework everything, rewire stuff, do it all. No. Oh, you have MySQL? Now suddenly we have HeatWave and we can turn all of your analytics workloads, hundreds of times faster. That's the kind of things that we see our customers asking for, and we're doing that across every layer of the stack.
Well, that's a great assessment, a great little preview into our future, Clay. And candidly, I've just really enjoyed this conversation. You've always been one to be more than pretty outspoken about where you see it going. I've appreciated the evolution and watching the business develop. Both Pat and I, our teams at Futurum and More Insights, will continue to track, continue to cover, and continue to provide our perspective. But a lot of improvement, a lot of vision, and like I said, I love competition. I truly do believe it spurs the innovation where the enterprise and the customers always benefit.
I completely agree. I really appreciate, this is my second year here. I really appreciate all the conversations that we have. I think it's going to be a great 6.5 Summit this year, and I can't wait for next year.
Yeah, don't worry. We're going to bring you back. You've now become a lifer at the 6.5 Summit. But great job. Thank you so much, Clay McGurk. Oracle leads the OCI business. Thanks again for attending and joining us here at the 6.5 Summit. For everybody out there, stay tuned in. This is day one. This is the Cloud and Infrastructure Day. We have 5 days, and we promise you lots more great speakers, great thinkers, great insights that you're going to glean from being here. All these sessions will be available on demand. So if you missed something, don't worry about it. Come back to it later, but stay tuned in, stay with us, share it with your friends. But for now, we got to go. See you later. Bye.